kindly ask for permission first from the chair to be recognized before speaking. Improper behavior will not be tolerated by this committee. Before we proceed with the hearing proper, may I ask, make a question later. I will ask a question later when colleagues are here. So at this point, we proceed with the public hearing for the amendment to the Public Act 10753 or the Right-of-Way Act. Delays in infrastructure projects are often rooted in the delays of right-of-way acquisition. Nung ako po ay secretary, ang favorite saying ko po ay if you deliver the right-of-way, we can deliver the project right away. So when I was secretary of DPWH, I encountered multiple delays in many high-impact infrastructure projects under the Build program. It was a recurring problem through my tenure as secretary. It was something that we had to meticulously deal with through several department orders based on the Right-of-Way Act every time we were pursuing a project. As a result of these expanded procedures, we are now able to enjoy several high-impact infrastructure projects such as the Metro Manila Skyway Stage 3. NLEX Harbor Link Segment 10 and the NLEX SLEX Connector. And I'd like to welcome my colleague, Senator Robin Padilla, to the committee hearing. Thank you for your time in joining us. And with the presence of Senator Padilla, I declare the presence of a quorum. Sige. Mahirap po ang proseso ng acquisition of right-of-way na talagang nakaka-apekto sa timeline ng ating mga projects. For example, it took 6 presidents to complete Radio Route 10, a 9.7-kilometer expressway from Delpan Bridge, Tondo, Manila to the mouth of Laboan River at Bangkulasi Bridge in Navotas City. We need to make significant tweaks to the current law in order to make it responsive to the needs of the implementing agencies. It is crucial to know how the Right-of-Way Act could be amended so it would be in sync with the dynamic changes in our infrastructure landscape. We also need to ensure that the implementing agencies will be empowered to fulfill their mandates once the law has been amended to fit the contemporary needs. Additionally, I am also looking forward to how we can harmonize and align the Right-of-Way Act with recently legislated related measures such as the RP-VARA and the PPP Act. Apart from this, kailangan din natin masigurado na itong amendment sa Right-of-Way Act will solve the compensation issue of private property owners affected by government infrastructure projects. We must ensure that moving forward, they will be provided with timely and just compensation. The just compensation is a time-honored principle enshrined in our Constitution. At kailangan natin masiguro na makukuha ng ating mga affected kababayans ang worth ng kanilang properties. We must develop our infrastructure landscape, but of course not at the expense of our fellow Filipinos. As the former infrastructure czar, naniniwala po ako na solving this bottlenecks right-of-way acquisition will give us high-impact infrastructure projects that are delivered timely and efficiently. Gamit ang solusyon na ito, mabibigyan po natin ang ating mga kababayan ng mga proyekto na makakatulong sa kanilang araw-araw na buhay at sa ekonomiya ng ating bansa. To start, at this point, we can start with the presentations. So, meron po bang mga presentations? Yes, please proceed, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. The Department of Transportation has a presentation regarding proposed amendments to the Right-of-Way Act. Mr. Chair, if it'd be allowed for me to speak to the Secretariat for them to flash the presentation of the Department of Transportation. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, senators, and other members or attendees of the committee. Essentially, while the DOTR has several amendments that we proposed in our position paper for today, just for the highlight of the committee, we would like to highlight particularly our request for amendments to the subterranean right-of-way for subway projects. I believe everyone is aware that the Department of Transportation is building the Metro Manila subway project. We'd like to emphasize and repeat that this will not be the last subway project, and our proposed amendments to the Right-of-Way Act with that, we hope to build even more subways, not just in Metro Manila, but also in our other urban centers throughout the country. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just to summarize, our proposed amendment to 10752 is to reduce the depth of the subterranean right-of-way from 50 meters, 50, to 15 meters from the surface. This will essentially allow the Department of Transportation and other government agencies to build more subterranean infrastructure. Next slide will show our two main reasons. One is to future-proof our infrastructure planning and infrastructure development, particularly with mass transportation systems, as well as improve and enhance safety for those passengers who will be using those subway systems. So we will give some examples. Next slide, please. I think we're all familiar, for example, or some of us might be familiar with the subway system in Tokyo. This is a very 2D map, but actually the real situation here is next slide. We can see the 3D map of those subways. Originally, Tokyo had few railway lines, subterranean railway lines, but over time, as their network grew, they had to dig deeper and deeper underground. It's hard to see it here, but I think the next slide will showcase the depth over time. So on the x-axis, we have the years. So the first subway of Tokyo was built in 1935, the Ginza line. That was around, this is from the Japan Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport, and Tourism. The Ginza line was 16 meters underground. This was built in 1934. As we know, World War II happened, so they didn't build a subway line. The next subway line that they built, 17 meters underground, the Marunouchi Railway Line. And over time, as their subterranean space was used for subways, they had to build subsequent subways underground, even further underground. Their most recent subway line is the Oedo line. You see that on the bottom right. That was in 2000. And the depth of that was 49 meters. We would like to note that that's actually less shallower than what we currently have in 10752, which is 50 meters. And since we are not here yet where we have several subway lines, but this is where we want to get to, we need to start shallower. And this is why the Department of Transportation would really want the amendment considered for a shallower depth for our subterranean right-of-way from 50. Again, 50 meters even from Japan is very deep, but we would like this raised to around 15 meters. Next slide. So this is regarding the future-proofing of our subway systems. But I guess one of the other major aspects that the Department of Transportation wants to ensure when it comes to our current and future subway lines is the safety of passengers. The depth of our subways or our subterranean infrastructure doesn't matter if it's for a sewage line, electricity, gas, they don't care. But when we have to evacuate live passengers, persons with disabilities, senior citizens, it matters to evacuate them from underground. Right now, a 50-meter evacuation, for example, wouldn't matter if it's above ground. A 50-meter building would be around 18 stories. Going downstairs isn't as challenging as evacuating going up. So we want the depth to be shallow to make sure that we're able to evacuate our passengers safely. So we do have some standards that we look at, especially when we're building our current subway line. Again, a good reference is the Japanese standards. So they have standards, for example, for the safety of evacuation of passengers. The next slide will be a bit technical, but essentially how we measure evacuation for subterranean infrastructure is in a matter of minutes. So in this case, for example, we do want to be able to evacuate people around 6 to 10 minutes when there's an incident. That's the safe margin usually. Next slide again showcases the future of our subway systems here in the Philippines. We are intending to build subways in Cebu, in Metro Cebu. We have the Metro Manila subway. That's actually only phase 1, what we're building right now. We're already preparing for phase 2. We have MRT4, MRT5 here in NCR. We're looking at the Alabang Zapote secondary line. I like to add here the Mindanao Railway projects, both phase 1 in the Davao area and phase 3 in the Cagayan de Oro area. We're currently discussing with LGUs in Cagayan de Oro Metro. And here we are seeing that we do have to tunnel also in the downtown area because, as we know, the above ground uh, uh, urban area is already built up. So as we develop our cities, as we grow economically, it becomes very surface right of way becomes very valuable, and maybe the only option for us is truly to go underground for subways.
Just a reminder, sorry to interrupt. Just a reminder, maybe some details we can discuss in the technical working group. We can build, siguro medyo mas broad na lang yung presentation natin. But kasi after this we will break up yung technical working group, or we can go deeper into the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I just have 3 last slides, which I'll run through really quickly. The next slide are examples from other countries. Next slide, I think in Singapore, they looked at, they recently amended their right-of-way law so that 30 meters and below would go for government subways. This is also because Singapore has built several subways already, and they have to keep going deeper when they want to build more subways. Next slide, we have some examples from Europe. Helsinki, actually, it's around 6 meters. And then the last slide in Montreal, I think it's actually, next slide, 10 meters underground. So it varies, Mr. Chair. And that concludes our presentation from the Department of Transportation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other presentations or just one? There's a DPW. May presentation pong DPWH, correct? Is there?
Mr. Chair, we have with us this afternoon our written position paper for the proposed amendments to the Right of Way Act. In summary, Mr. Chair,
You can summarize.
we
Yes.
can mention that the comments contained in our position paper is themed around the current conditions on the field and the reality that right-of-way funding is really very limited for DPWH. So in our list of recommendations here, Mr. Chair, everything is geared towards maximizing the allocation for right-of-way acquisition and streamlining the process of right-of-way acquisition. Because as it stands right now, Mr. Chair, the entire right-of-way acquisition process will take at around 2 years. 1 year for, ideally, for the preparation of the right-of-way acquisition plan, and then the right-of-way acquisition process itself, Mr. Chair, can take about a year or 6 months to a year, under ideal conditions. So one of the challenges that DPWH is facing is the validity of the fund for the right-of-way acquisition. Under the cash-based budgeting, the validity of the fund is 1 year to 2 years. And under the DBM guidelines, the right-of-way funding is not among those classified for comprehensive release, meaning it is not released immediately upon the effectivity of the GAA. It is for later release. So we are dependent on the issuance of the SARO, which this year, Mr. Chair, came at the later part of the first quarter. So it is really a challenge to comply with the requisites in order to disburse the funds.
So USEC, so you're saying USEC that the provision where the DPWH or the relevant government agency is required to finish a right-of-way plan prior to implementation may not be realistic. And I can vouch for that also from personal experience, that sometimes in budgeting there are items that were not part of the original NEP, that were amendments, so they were not, the necessary preparations were not made, because you cannot anticipate what will come out in the GAA, and you can only recommend. So I understand that point, and I think we should all the committee should take notice of that. An ideal world, yes, we should have a plan. But at the same time, we should be a little flexible because you have to award it within a year and you have to implement it within 2 years, diba? Yung so your point is well taken, and we should note that in the committee. I think the point of USEC Lapus is very well taken. So that's correct. I assume that's what I was gathering from your statement, that this what would you propose as an alternative?
Mr. Chair, first of all, I would like to extend our appreciation to this committee for considering our initial recommendations to the proposed amendments of RA 10752. Maybe a few points, Mr. Chair, for emphasis, in line with our advocacy to maximize the budget for right-of-way funding is maybe in coming up with a standard value for the price or offer for the purchase price of the right-of-way acquisition.
Have you studied how the RP? Sorry, excuse. Have you studied related to that the RP Vara? Have you studied that and its implications toward this law?
Yes, Mr. Chair. In summary, the RP Vara is a good law. It will provide a standard value that may be used by all government agencies, for DPWH for right-of-way acquisition in the appraisal, and other government agencies for taxation purposes. With respect to right-of-way acquisition, Mr. Chair, we will be able to use the standard value provided under RP Vara for right-of-way acquisition. It will limit, or it will lower our cost for acquisition because we will no longer be required to purchase or procure in the independent property appraisals. And we will no longer be required to engage the services which requires costs for GFIs. So if we have one standard value, Mr. Chair, it will be easier because it will lessen the time because we will no longer need to procure IPAs and GFIs. So it is a good law. However, it is still in the process of issuing and implementing rules and regulations, which I understand, Mr. Chair, will take about 2 years so that the law will be effective. In the meantime, DPWH is coming up with interim measures to address the gap with the issuance of the RP Vara. But DPWH is really very appreciative of the RP Vara, Mr. Chair. So we also propose that we adopt it in the amendments of the Right-of-Way Act.
Yes, thank you, And I also before we move, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of our Majority Floor Leader, Senator Tolentino. Thank you Thank you, Mrs.
Just a quick retort.
Yes, we recognize, the chair recognizes Senator Tolentino.
Chairman, I just overheard something. It will take you 2 years to craft an IRR. That's more than half the life of a congressional term. Ganun katagal ba ho gawin yun?
Mr. Chair, I stand corrected. Not only the IRR, the scheduled market values under the RP Vara law will require consultations and public hearings. It is outlined under the law po that the whole process will take about 2 years po, excluding the time for crafting the IRR, which will take about 6 months.
Is a
6 months.
long period, and you can go faster. So you intend to complete that not within, but at par with the deadline.
Mr. Chair, the coming up with the schedule of market values is an interagency collaboration between LGUs, the Department of Finance, and the BIR, as I understand. Timelines have been set under the law, Mr. Chair.
Can we request the DOF? Maybe you can comment on this this possible timeline for the reconciliation between the RP Vara and this law.
Yes, Your Honor. We're presently crafting the with the BR the rules regarding the RP VAR.
What is your timeline?
Your Honor, we intend to submit to the Secretary the draft IRR by October.
Over, not 2 years.
The IRR, Mr. Chair, will be ready in October, but the updating of the schedule of values itself, Mr. Chair, will take about 2 years as provided under the law.
Other questions? Just came here to provide you additional quorum support, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And thank you for being a very active Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you.
And belated happy birthday as well.
Thank you.
Birthday niya kahapon eh. Kaya wag niyong pahirapan yung chairman ko ah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Tol. And I also have a question regarding the if with the RP Vara once the or no let me go back to the subterranean for a moment. I'm curious about, and this is a technical question, hindi ko lang alam kung alam mo yung sagot sa tanong ko, but anyway I'll ask it. In terms of ano pong effect sa, halimbawa ako yung may-ari ng lupa at 15 meters na yung, what does that preclude me from putting up a building? Ano bang magiging effect sa property owner?
Mr. Chair, with regards to the ability to build on top from if there's a tunnel. So the tunnel has, if we build a tunnel, say the tunnel boring machine, there is a load that that tunnel can support. There are examples where we've tunneled and then we can build a building on top of that. So I guess the limit will be the load that the building will have. So if it's a single-story building, it should not affect it. But if it's a high-rise, I think the tallest building in the Philippines right now is the one in the Grand Hyatt that's 300 meters. It would be difficult to build that with a subway tunnel. Now with the subway naman, sir, with the tunneling, we will not touch any existing structure. And as much as possible, we will still try to utilize public right of way. However, there are instances where we do have to tunnel underneath private properties.
Yes.
And in those instances, we try to minimize the impact to potential high value structures, especially, so it depends on the zonal zoning. If it's commercial compared to low density residential, for low density residential, it should not affect the ability to build pretty high. But for the exact technical standards, sir, yes, we would have to get back to you on the TWG for that one because it differs from
Yes,
place to
kasi I
place.
can foresee, siguro baka magkaroon tayo ng maraming scenarios, like idadaan natin, baka may existing building na. And even though it's 40 meters, baka may effect din sa structural integrity ng building. So ano maging compensation ng building owner kung hindi siya papayag, or pwede ba natin pilitin yung owner na maglagay ng subway sa ilalim niya? So I mean, maybe you comment some scenarios.
Yes, sir. If it's an existing building, we
Yes.
are able to tunnel. And so long as we don't impact the foundations, that means we have to go deeper than the foundations. But it's going to be very difficult to look at future construction. What we're doing right now for the subway project, if there is existing foundations, we avoid it. So for example, we are tunneling under gas stations. So we're lower, for example, than the storage of the fuel. So there is a the technical terms are it's 2.5 times the radius of the tunnel is usually your easement from the nearest foundation. So I guess we'll bring in also perhaps some of our Japanese engineers here.
And I
But
think,
there is ways for us to tunnel underneath.
yes,
existing
and I think
structures.
for future we should also have representatives from the real estate sector, so they can also comment, some specialists, maybe some engineering specialists, so that we can also anticipate any possible scenarios in the future. Should we lower the threshold for subterranean right of way? I think it's a very technical question to answer. So I would, if I can, I'd like to direct the committee in the future. We can invite some technical people, and maybe some representatives from people who build, I don't know, siguro mga developers also, yung high-rise developers who might be affected. But I remember when I was secretary, usually hangga't maaari talagang dinadaan nila sa ilalim ng kalsada, public road. Hangga't maaari. I remember with the subway, it was under C5. So I know, but like you said, there will be some cases probably that will require boring underneath a structure or on a private property of an individual. So I think we have to just anticipate different scenarios in the law, and we can take that up in the technical working group.